Just as disco might have seemed like a very unlikely place for a kids group to become a grown-up act, Las Vegas, with its showcase theaters, wasn't exactly the family atmosphere that Motown had originally groomed us for, but we decided to play there just the same. There wasn't much to do in Las Vegas if you didn't gamble, but we thought of the theaters in the city as just big clubs with the club hours and clientele of our Gary and Southside Chicago days, except for the tourists. Tourist crowds were a good thing for us since they knew our old hits and would watch our skits and listen to new songs without getting restless. It was great to see the delight on their faces when little Janet came out in her Mae West costume for a number or two. We had performed skits before in a 1971 TV special called Going Back to Indiana, which celebrated our Gary homecoming, the first time we all decided to return. Our records had become hits all over the world since we'd seen our hometown last. It was even more fun to do skits with 9 of us instead of just 5, plus whatever guests happened to appear with us. Our expanded lineup was a dream come true for Dad. Looking back, I know the Las Vegas shows were an experience I'll never recapture. We didn't have the high-pressure concert crowd wanting all our hit songs and nothing more. We were temporarily freed from the pressures of having to keep up with what everyone else was doing. We had a ballad or two in every show to break in my new voice. At 15, I was having to think about things like that. There were people from CBS television at our Las Vegas shows, and they approached us about doing a variety show for the upcoming summer. We were very interested and pleased that we were being recognized as more than just a Motown group. Over time, this distinction would not be lost on us. Because we had creative control over our Las Vegas review, it was harder for us to return to our lack of freedom in recording and writing music once we got back to Los Angeles. We'd always intended to grow and develop in the musical field. That was our bread and butter, and we felt we were being held back. Sometimes I felt we were being treated as if we still lived in Berry Gordy's house, and with Jermaine now a son-in-law, our frustration was only heightened. By the time we began putting our own act together, there were signs that other Motown institutions were changing. Marvin Gaye took charge of his own music and produced his masterpiece album, What's Going On? Stevie Wonder was learning more about electronic keyboards than the experienced studio-hired guns. They were coming to him for advice. One of our last great memories from our Motown days is of Stevie leading us in chanting to back up his tough, controversial song, You Haven't Done Nothin'. Though Stevie and Marvin were still in the Motown camp, they had fought for, and won, the right to make their own records, and even to publish their own songs. Motown hadn't even budged with us. To them, we were still kids, even if they weren't dressing us and protecting us any longer. Our problems with Motown began around 1974, when we told them in no uncertain terms that we wanted to write and produce our own songs. Basically, we didn't like the way our music sounded at the time. We had a strong competitive urge, and we felt we were in danger of being eclipsed by other groups who were creating a more contemporary sound. Motown said, "No, you can't write your own songs. You've got to have songwriters and producers." They not only refused to grant our requests, they told us it was taboo to even mention that we wanted to do our own music. I really got discouraged and began to seriously dislike all the material Motown was feeding us. Eventually, I became so disappointed and upset that I wanted to leave Motown behind. When I feel that something is not right, I have to speak up. I know most people don't think of me as tough or strong-willed, but that's just because they don't know me. Eventually, my brothers and I reached a point with Motown where we were miserable, but no one was saying anything. My brothers didn't say anything. My father didn't say anything. So it was up to me to arrange a meeting with Berry Gordy and talk to him. I was the one who had to say that we, the Jackson Five, were going to leave Motown. I went over to see him face to face, and it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. If I had been the only one of us who was unhappy, I might have kept my mouth shut, but there had been so much talk at home about how unhappy we all were that I went in and talked to him and told him how we felt. I told him I was unhappy. Remember, I love Berry Gordy. I think he's a genius, a brilliant man who's one of the giants of the music business. I have nothing but respect for him, but that day I was a lion. I complained that we weren't allowed any freedom to write songs and produce. He told me that he still thought we needed outside producers to make hit records. But I knew better. Barry was talking out of anger. That was a difficult meeting, but we're friends again, and he's still like a father to me, very proud of me and happy about my success. No matter what, I will always love Barry because he taught me some of the most valuable things I've learned in my life. He's the man who told the Jackson Five they would become a part of history, and that is exactly what happened. Motown has done so much for so many people over the years. I feel we're fortunate to have been one of the groups Barry personally introduced to the public, and I owe enormous thanks to this man. My life would have been very different without him. We all felt that Motown started us, supporting our professional careers. We all felt our roots were there, and we all wished we could stay. We were grateful for everything they had done for us, but change is inevitable. I'm a person of the present, and I have to ask, how are things going now? What's happening now? What's going to happen in the future that could affect what has happened in the past? It's important for artists always to maintain control of their lives and work. There's been a big problem in the past with artists being taken advantage of. I've learned that a person can prevent that from happening by standing up for what he or she believes is right without concern for the consequences. We could have stayed with Motown, but if we had, we'd probably be an oldies act. I knew it was time for change, so we followed our instincts, and we won when we decided to try for a fresh start with another label, Epic. We were relieved that we had finally made our feelings clear and cut the ties that were binding us, but we were also really devastated when Jermaine decided to stay with Motown. He was Barry's son-in-law, and his situation was more complicated than ours. He thought it was more important for him to stay than to leave, and Jermaine always did as his conscience told him, so he left the group. I clearly remember the first show we did without him, because it was so painful for me. Since my earliest days on the stage, and even in our rehearsals in our Gary living room, Jermaine stood at my left with his bass. I depended on being next to Jermaine, and when I did that first show without him there, with no one next to me, I felt totally naked on stage for the first time in my life. So we worked harder to compensate for the loss of one of our shining stars, Jermaine. I remember that show well because we got 3 standing ovations. We worked hard. When Jermaine left the group, Marlon had a chance to take his place, and he really shone on stage. My brother Randy officially took my place as bongo player and the baby of the band. Around the time that Jermaine left, things were further complicated for us because of the fact that we were doing a stupid summer replacement TV series. It was a dumb move to agree to do that show, and I hated every minute of it. I had loved the old Jackson 5 cartoon show. I used to wake up early on Saturday mornings and say, "I'm a cartoon!" But I hated doing this television show because I felt it would hurt our recording career rather than help it. I think a TV series is the worst thing an artist who has a recording career can do. I kept saying, "But this is going to hurt our record sales." And others said, "No, it's going to help them." They were totally wrong. We had to dress in ridiculous outfits and perform stupid comedy routines to canned laughter. It was all so fake. We didn't have time to learn or master anything about television. We had to create 3 dance numbers a day, trying to meet a deadline. The Nielsen ratings controlled our lives from week to week. I'd never do it again. It's a dead-end road. What happens is partly psychological. You are in people's homes every week, and they begin to feel they know you too well. You're doing all this silly comedy to canned laughter, and your music begins to recede into the background. When you try to get serious again and pick up your career where you left off, you can't because you're overexposed. People are thinking of you as the guys who do the silly, crazy routines. One week you're Santa Claus, the next week you're Prince Charming, another week you're a rabbit. It's crazy because you lose your identity in the business. The rocker image you had is gone. I'm not a comedian, I'm not a show host, I'm a musician. That's why I've turned down offers to host the Grammy Awards and the American Music Awards. Is it really entertaining for me to get up there and crack a few weak jokes and force people to laugh because I'm Michael Jackson when I know in my heart that I'm not funny?